What would you do if someone offered to make you the most beautiful person in the world? But there was one condition. You could never look at your own reflection in the mirror, not even once. Would you take the risk? In a small village surrounded by lush green fields and flowing streams, there was a woman named Lami. The village was lively, with children playing under the sun and traders calling out their goods in the marketplace. Lami was not like the other women in the village. She was very kind and intelligent, known for her gentle heart and quiet nature. But there was one thing she wanted more than anything else. It was beauty. While other women were admired for their lovely faces and beautiful features, Lami felt overlooked. She dreamed of the day when people would stop, stare, and marvel at her beauty. She really desired to be beautiful so she could get the attention that everybody else was getting. Lami believed that their attention would change her life. As the years passed, her desire only grew. It consumed her, becoming an obsession she could not shake off. She spent hours standing by the village well, looking into the water's surface, wishing her reflection would change. But it never did. The same plain face stared back at her day after day. The other women noticed that she always spent a lot of time looking at her reflection. They whispered and rumored behind her back, and sometimes they laughed at her silent longing for beauty she did not have. Lami often heard rumors about a powerful old woman who lived deep in the forest beyond the village. They said the old woman could grant any wish, but at a price. People whispered about how the old woman had given riches to the poor and even brought dead people back to life. But there were always dark rumors that followed these stories, rumors of terrible consequences, strange disappearances, and worse. The villagers warned each other to stay away from the forest. Many who had gone seeking the woman's help never returned, or if they came back, they were changed forever. Still, the thought of this woman stirred something in Lami. If anyone could make her beautiful, it was the old woman. Lami watched as many beautiful women in the village got married, some younger than her. It bothered her that she could not get any man to notice her. She felt invisible, like she blended in with the air. When her young cousin got married, Lami was so sad about that. The wedding was grand, filled with music and laughter, and she stood among the guests, feeling lonelier than ever. I have to do something about this. I am tired of waiting and hoping that my kindness and my internal beauty will speak for me. I have to get up and do something before it's too late, she said to herself. Late one evening, while the sun went down and the village grew quiet, Lami made a decision. She could no longer bear the feeling of being invisible. Her desire for beauty was greater than her fear of the unknown. That night, she sneaked out of her home, leaving behind the safety of her village, and entered the dark forest. The forest was thick with towering trees and shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air smelled of damp earth and old leaves. The deeper Lami walked, the more she felt the air around her grow cold. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she pressed on, her feet guiding her toward the heart of the forest where the old woman lived. As she kept walking into the forest, hours passed, and she began to doubt her decision. She had no idea where she was going, and the branches of the trees made it feel like the forest was closing in on her. The hoot of an owl startled her, and the distant sound of rustling made her skin crawl. Just when she thought about turning around, she saw it, a small dirty hut hidden between the roots of a big ancient tree. A faint light flickered from within. casting eerie shadows on the ground. Lamy waited for a moment before approaching the door. With trembling hands, she knocked. The door opened slowly, revealing an old figure seated inside. The old woman's eyes glittered with a knowing look, as if she had been expecting Lamy all along. The scent of strange herbs and burning incense filled the small room, making Lamy feel light-headed. "Lamy, so you have come for beauty," the old woman said, her voice low and deep. "You seek to be admired and adored by all who see you, don't you?" Lamy nodded, too nervous to speak. The old woman laughed softly. "I can grant you this wish. I can make you the most beautiful woman the world has ever seen. But there is one condition." Lamy leaned in, her heart racing. "You must never, ever look at your own reflection again. No mirrors, no water, no glass. If you do, the consequences will be severe." The warning sent a chill down Lamy's spine, but her desire for beauty was too strong. She thought to herself, how hard can it be? I have lived without beauty for so long, so I can live without seeing myself in the mirror. I will do whatever it takes for me to be beautiful. The price is not that bad. Without a second thought, she agreed. The old woman's smile widened, her teeth yellowed and sharp. She made some concoction and gave Lamy to drink. The potion was bitter, and Lamy had to force herself to swallow it. Then the old woman waved her hand over Lamy, and in an instant, a warm sensation spread through Lamy's body. It felt as though she was being transformed from the inside out. Her skin tingled, her hair felt fuller, and she could feel the change before she even saw it. When Lamy left the old woman's hut, she felt different. A warmth spread through her veins, an energy she had never felt before. When she returned to the village, the reaction was immediate. People stared as she passed by, their mouths open wide, their gazes filled with awe. People whispered with admiration, their voices hushed yet eager. People followed her everywhere, looking at how beautiful she was, their footsteps echoing her own. Lamy's beauty was beyond anything the village had ever seen. Her once plain and ordinary features had transformed into something breathtaking. Her skin glowed like the sun at dawn. Her hair shimmered like silk caught in moonlight, and her eyes sparkled like the stars scattered across the midnight sky. Her body was curvier, sculpted, as if by the gods themselves, and her face was the most beautiful the village had ever known. At first, Lamy was so happy. Every day people complimented her, admired her, and treated her like royalty. The attention she had once longed for was now hers. The girls who had once laughed at her now envied her with glances of both admiration and resentment. The boys who had never noticed her were now fighting for her attention, their once indifferent eyes now filled with longing. Men lined up outside her house to propose marriage to her, bringing gifts of woven fabrics, rare beads, and precious stones. Girls lined up outside her house to invite her to places, hoping to bask in her radiance. Lamy's beauty had made her the most important person in the village, but with all the admiration came something unexpected. She wanted to look at herself in the mirror so much. She could feel her beauty in the way people gasped when they saw her. She could hear how people were in awe of her beauty, but she could not see it. She couldn't look in the mirror to see what she looked like, and as the days passed, this small curiosity grew into a burning desire, an itch she could not scratch. She had followed the old woman's rule at first, avoiding mirrors and all reflections, but it became harder and harder. The more people complimented her, the more she wanted to see how beautiful she looked. The old woman's warning echoed in her mind. No mirrors. But Lammy told herself, just one glance, just one time. Take a look for just one time. One night, unable to resist any longer, Lammy sneaked into her bedroom and took the small mirror she had hidden under her bed. The room was dimly lit, the flickering flame of a single lantern casting long shadows on the walls. With trembling hands, she lifted the mirror to her face. At first, she was mesmerized. The reflection staring back at her was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen or imagined. Her skin was flawless, smooth as polished stone. Her eyes sparkled like precious gems, and her hair fell in perfect waves. She smiled and admired the transformation. But as she continued to stare, something shifted. Her reflection began to change. Her skin, which was once smooth and radiant, started to crack like parched earth under the scorching sun. Her eyes, which were once bright and full of light, darkened into deep hollow pits, swallowing the gleam of life. Her hair, which was full and beautiful, began to fall away in clumps, drifting like dead leaves. The longer she looked, the more monstrous her reflection became. Lammy screamed and dropped the mirror, but it was too late. The curse had been unleashed. By the next morning, her beauty was gone. She looked in the mirror again, desperate to see her beautiful reflection once more, but the monster was all that stared back at her. Her heart raced as she ran to the village, hoping to find someone who could help her. But to her shock, the villagers still saw her as beautiful. To them, nothing had changed. They continued to compliment her and marvel at her appearance, completely unaware of the horror that Lammy now saw in herself. It was then that Lammy realized the true meaning of the curse. She had traded her soul for beauty, and now, while others still saw her as perfect, she could only see the monster in herself. Every mirror, every reflection showed her the twisted and horrific version of herself. As days turned into weeks, Lammy became more and more isolated. She refused to leave her home, too scared to see her reflection on any surface. She covered all the mirrors, avoided water, and even refused to go outside when it rained because she was scared she would see her reflection in the puddles on the ground. She shuddered at the mere thought of catching a glimpse of the hideous creature she had become. But no matter how much she tried to escape, the reflection haunted her. It was in her dreams, in the shadows of her room, in every corner of her mind. The beauty she had once craved was now her curse. The reflection scared her and made her scream at the monster. Her family heard her screams everywhere in the house, but they couldn't see what was scaring her. She pointed to her horrifying reflection, but no one could see it except her. Her family was worried that she had gone mad, so they locked all the doors to prevent her from running into the village, fearing she would lose herself completely. A few weeks later, the family was desperate to undo the damage Lammy had done, so they took her back to the forest, looking for the old woman's hut. But the forest seemed different this time, darker and more frightening. The towering trees loomed overhead, their branches whispering secrets in the wind. They searched for days, wandering through the dense trees, but the hut was nowhere to be found. When she finally stumbled upon an empty space in the forest where the hut used to be, there was nothing left but silence. The old woman was gone, and her chance of undoing the curse was gone as well. Lamy was left to live with her decision. Though the villagers continued to praise her beauty, Lamy only saw the monster in the mirror, the reflection that showed her true self, twisted by vanity, corrupted by her desire for perfection. She was so withdrawn from people and refused to leave her room. No one knew the true reason why such a beautiful woman refused to come outside. Her once joyful smile had faded into a permanent expression of sorrow, her laughter replaced by the silence of regret. And so, Lamy lived out her days, haunted by the reflection she could never escape. The beauty that had once been her greatest desire had become her greatest curse. The story of Lamy teaches us a powerful lesson. Sometimes what we desire the most comes with a price we are not ready to pay. Vanity and obsession with external beauty can blind us to the true value of inner self-worth. Lamy's fate reminds us that true beauty is not in how others see us, but in how we see ourselves. Thank you for watching my channel. Don't forget to check out more interesting and captivating stories. See you in the next video. The next day, Tara arrived at the restaurant, determined to find out Lainey's secret recipe. She spied on Kira as she was cooking, taking note of all the ingredients used. The aroma of the food was intoxicating, filling the room with spices and herbs that Tara had never encountered before. However, when she reached home that evening, Tara could not remember anything that happened at the restaurant. Once upon a time, there lived a village cook popularly known as Madame Kaya, who was the owner of a local food joint in the village, where all the men loved to eat. The restaurant, a small wooden structure adorned with colorful fabrics, stood at the center of the bustling market. Kaya's restaurant was always crowded with men of the village who believed that she cooked the best meals. People would often fight among themselves and even go as far as washing their own plates, just to have a taste of Kira's meal. Because of Kira's food, many men began to refuse their wives' food, comparing it to that of Kira. This angered the women of the village, whose husbands stopped eating their meals. One day, the aggrieved women gathered, as they had all had enough of what was happening. They deliberated on what to do about Kira, as they all wanted their husbands to start eating their food again. The meeting was held under the shade of a giant baobab tree, where the women often gathered to share news and grievances. One of the women, named Elia, suggested that instead of plotting against Madame Kia, they should do everything possible to find out how she cooked her meals. Another woman named Nala disagreed, saying that what they should rather do is to ensure that they close down Kira's restaurant, because as long as the restaurant was still in the village, their husbands would never eat their food. The whole room was now filled with murmuring, as the women found it difficult to agree on what they would do to Madame Kaya. However, all their husbands were currently at Kira's restaurant, eating and praising her delicious meals. Elia, determined to find a solution, proposed that a secret spy be sent to work for Madame Kaya, as she heard that she was currently looking for a plate washer, because her last plate washer mysteriously disappeared. The women all pondered on who they would send, as Madame Kaya knew them all and would be unwilling to employ any of them in her restaurant. One of the women then stepped forward to suggest that her niece, who had just moved into their village, would be the best spy, as no one knew who she was. The niece had recently arrived from a distant town, her face unfamiliar to most. All the women screamed in jubilation as they celebrated their clever plan to uncover Madame Kaya's cooking secrets. The next day, the woman's niece, named Eileen, discreetly applied for the position of plate washer at Kira's restaurant. Impressed by Eileen's humility and neat appearance, Madame Kaya hired her without hesitation. However, Eileen noticed something strange about Madame Kaya, who told her to always enter her kitchen using her back. The kitchen was dimly lit, with an eerie atmosphere that made Eileen's skin crawl. Madame Kaya warned Tara never to enter her kitchen using her front, because the day that she did, she would regret ever disobeying her orders. Eileen, although skeptical about working for Madame Kaya, decided to take on the job of the plate washer. She spent the whole day washing plates, the scent of the food clinging to her clothes, and left the restaurant late at night when all the customers had left. After her first day of working at Kira's restaurant, Eileen returned home exhausted. Her auntie, eager to know how her day went, asked, but Tara realized that she could no longer remember all that happened at the restaurant. This was strange, as Tara wasn't one to forget things so easily. The next day, Tara arrived at the restaurant, determined to find out Kira's secret recipe. She spied on Kira as she was cooking, her eyes following every movement, taking note of all the ingredients used. The sizzle of the pans and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables echoed in her ears. However, when she reached home that evening, she could not remember anything that happened at the restaurant. Her auntie was so furious as she accused Eileen of taking sides with Kira and pretending not to remember anything that happened at the restaurant. Tara tried to explain that she too was shocked at what was happening, but her auntie found it hard to believe. One afternoon, a woman named Mama Z came to the restaurant, fuming in anger. Her husband had informed her of his decision to marry Madame Kaya, and Mama Z came to the restaurant to confront Kira. Not knowing that she was not alone, several other women also trooped to the restaurant, accusing Madame Kaya of trying to take their husbands. The whole restaurant was now in chaos as the women confronted Kira about the alleged affair with their husbands. Madame Kaya, however, denied all accusations, stating that she had no interest in marrying anyone's husband. Amidst the commotion, Eileen quietly observed Madame Kaya. She noticed that she seemed unusually calm, almost as if she knew something the others didn't. Eileen decided to seize the opportunity to get to the bottom of what was happening. She monitored when Madame Kaya had left the kitchen and snuck into Lani's kitchen, but instead of using her back to enter the kitchen, as Madame Kaya had instructed her to, Eileen walked through the kitchen door with her front and noticed something she had never seen in the kitchen before. Eileen noticed that the whole kitchen had stains of blood, the color dark and ominous, and wondered where the blood could have come from. Immediately, Kira walked into the kitchen, holding a blood-stained cloth from underneath her dress. Madame Kaya dipped the blood-stained cloth into her pot of food and began to stir continuously. The scent that emerged from the pot was both sweet and repugnant. After a few minutes, she removed the cloth, and Tara opened her mouth in shock, as she never knew that Madame Kaya cooked her food with the blood from her menstrual cycle. Tara pretended not to notice what was happening and realized that all this while, Kira had been using evil powers to make her forget all that ever happened in her kitchen. Whenever Tara walked into the kitchen with her back, she lost all her memory of the things that occurred in the kitchen because of Kira's evil charm. However, the charm was broken immediately. Eileen went against Kira's rule and walked into the kitchen with her front. Now she was able to remember everything that she saw. Eileen was extremely scared as she feared what would happen if Kira found out what she had done. At this point, Tara could not wait to close from work to go tell her auntie all that she had seen in Kira's kitchen. As night came, Tara's heart began to race so fast. She was afraid of what would happen if Madame Kaya realized that she knew the secret to her delicious meals. After washing up all the plates, Tara decided to head home when she suddenly heard a loud and evil laugh behind her. It was Madame Kaya, who blew a powdery substance on Aileen's face. A few hours later, Tara woke up in a strange room. The walls were cold and damp, with only a faint flicker of light from a nearby candle. She screamed for help and heard the faint voice of a young woman behind her in the room, who asked if she was the new plate washer. Tara replied with a yes, and the woman told her that she was the previous plate washer, who had been locked away for months. Tara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She asked the woman why she was locked away, and the young woman revealed to her that she had broken Kira's only rule and saw the secret to her delicious meals. The young woman told Tara that Kira had locked her up in the room and always fed her once a day with an enchanted meal, which always made her forget all that she saw. However, when she noticed what the meals were doing to her, she stopped eating them and secretly poured them away so as not to raise suspicion with Kira, who believed that her memory had been wiped clean. Determined to break free, Tara and the young woman, whose name was Mira, devised a plan. They waited for the right moment. When Kira was away from the house, Tara and Mira used the weight of their bodies to push hard on the door, but noticed that they began to feel weak. Madame Kaya had anticipated this and surrounded her house with a very strong charm to prevent anyone from escaping. The more they tried to walk towards the door, the weaker they became. Tara and Mira realized that they needed a different approach to break the enchantment. Immediately, Tara remembered her late father's last words to her. He had said that whenever she was in trouble, she should call out his name 3 times, and he would be there to rescue her. Eileen called out her late father's name 3 times, and suddenly she felt a surge of energy course through her body. As she approached the door again, this time the charm's resistance significantly reduced, allowing her to push the door open without succumbing to any weakness. Tara assisted Mira as they escaped into the night. They arrived at Tara's auntie's house, and Eileen shared their entire ordeal, exposing Kaya's evil practices. The next morning, Eileen's auntie, along with the women of the village, decided to confront Kira and put an end to her evil practices. Madame Kaya, sensing that her secret had been exposed, tried to run away from the village but was apprehended by the angry women who demanded justice for the harm she had caused the entire community. Madame Kaya, cornered and powerless, confessed to her evil actions. She revealed that she had been using her menstrual blood to enchant her food, making it irresistible to the men of the village. She also admitted to locking away those who discovered her secret, ensuring that they remained under her control. The women then brought the matter before the village elders, who condemned Madame Kaya for her wicked deeds. They asked why she did what she did and Madame Kaya, revealed that since her husband died many years ago, she envied all the women that were happily married and could not stand to see them happy. So, she decided to use her food to bring discord to the happy families. Everyone opened their mouths in shock as the elders banished Madame Kaya from the village forever. As Madame Kaya left the village, all the men returned to their wives to apologize for their behavior. With Madame Kaya gone, the women of the village reclaimed their rightful place in their husbands' lives, and the bonds of family and community grew stronger as everyone realized the importance of love, trust, and loyalty. The valuable lesson from the story is that greed, envy, and deceit can lead to one's downfall. It reminds us to appreciate the people and blessings in our lives and to avoid resorting to harmful actions out of jealousy or discontentment. True happiness comes from love, trust, and integrity, not from manipulating others for personal gain. Contentment and gratitude are the keys to a fulfilling life, and we should never be tempted by the illusion of greener grass elsewhere, as it often leads to regret and disaster. Thank you for watching my channel. I invite you to explore more captivating and insightful stories on this channel, where every tale is filled with valuable lessons and entertainment. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected. See you in the next video. Once upon a time, in the beautiful city of Ayad, there lived a boy named Leon who never regarded others. He was so rude and disrespectful that people shook their heads whenever he walked by. He would beat up his poor grandmother whenever she tried to correct him, and even left home for days as a way of punishing her, knowing how worried she would be that he didn't return. His mother died while giving birth to him, and her mother took on the responsibility of raising him. However, owing to the way his mother died, his grandmother did all she could to avoid situations that would make him miss his dead mother, so she allowed him to get away with so many unruly behaviors. As Leon began to grow, he became so disrespectful and out of control. She would cry herself to sleep every night, praying that her grandson would one day change his ways. But Leon was not ready to change his ways. He always got himself into trouble that often required his grandmother to spend huge amounts of money to bail him out. One morning, Leon strolled into the nearby market. He saw an old woman who was selling oranges by the roadside. Without asking, Leon grabbed some oranges and stuffed them into his bag. The old woman pleaded with him to pay for the fruits. "My son, please pay. These oranges are all that I have," she said to Leon, who laughed in her face and asked what she was going to do if he refused to pay. "What will you do if I don't pay? Will you come and take them from me?" he asked the old woman mockingly. As he kicked her basket with his foot, oranges scattered across the dusty road, and the old woman fell to her knees and began to pick them up with her trembling hands. People in the market gathered around and began to shout angrily at Leon. "Shame on you, Leon! Have you no heart?" But Leon did not care. He bit into one of the oranges and walked away laughing without a care. Leon was extremely stubborn. He had no respect for anyone and believed he was untouchable because of the kind of friends that he kept. He once laughed at an old man who was crossing the road with his walking stick. Leon continued to mock the elderly man, imitating his slow, shaky movements and laughing so loudly that passers-by stared in disbelief. "Look at him!" Leon shouted. "Is he walking or dancing?" he said as he laughed. The old man, hurt but calm, paused and looked at Leon with his sad eyes. Young boy, remember this day. Every action has its consequences. You cannot run from them forever, he said to Leon, who only rolled his eyes and walked away. He had no respect for anyone, and his grandmother bore the brunt of his cruelty daily. One evening, rainy evening, Leon's grandmother managed to save a small amount of money after weeks of hard labor. She hid it under her mattress, hoping to buy food and medicine. But Leon discovered the money and stole it. He used it to gamble with his friends. When she confronted him tearfully, he yelled at her angrily and asked what she was planning to do with the little change. Is it because of that little money that you are stressing me out? He asked his grandmother, who broke down in tears and began to cry. She was so devastated, knowing that she had no money left to feed them for the rest of the week. All she worked for weeks, was gone within a flash, and this broke her, knowing that her grandson was leading a very destructive life. That night, Leon's grandmother knelt by her bedside, tears streaming down her face. She lifted her trembling hands to the heavens and cried out, "Oh God, please touch my grandson's heart. Let him see the error of his ways before it's too late." But Leon, oblivious to his grandmother's pain, was out with his friends, gambling and drinking, without a single care in the world. The next evening, Leon and his friends were passing by the mortuary at Ring Road. He dared them to sneak into the mortuary, not caring how sacred it was. "Let's go and see the dead bodies. I hear they keep them stacked like firewood," Leon said as the others laughed. Leon, who was always eager to prove how brave he was, convinced them all to sneak into the mortuary. They went in through the back, and an unsettling silence filled the space. Metal tables lined the room, and lifeless bodies lay covered with white sheets. But instead of feeling fear or respect for the dead, Leon began to laugh hysterically. "Look at them stiff like dried fish. What a waste," he said, pulling back one of the white sheets to mock the lifeless body of a woman that lay beneath. The mortuary attendant, hearing some weird noises, walked in to find Leon laughing and mocking the dead. "Young man," the attendant said quietly, his voice filled with anger, "you have mocked the dead today, but mark my words, the dead do not forget. Leave this place now before I call the authorities." Leon and his friends burst into laughter again, completely ignoring the old man's warning. "Old man, go back to your ghosts. You can't scare us," Leon sneered, waving his hand dismissively. But just as they turned to leave, Leon stopped in his tracks. With a mischievous grin, he turned back to the lifeless body of the woman he had mocked earlier. "Look at her lying there like she owns the place," he said mockingly. Then, in an act of sheer disrespect, Leon touched the woman's breast, laughing loudly as his friends gasped in shock. The mortuary attendant's face went pale as he murmured under his breath, "May the dead have mercy on you, boy." The group ran out of the mortuary, still chuckling, but a strange silence seemed to follow them out into the bustling streets of Iade. That night, Leon could not sleep. His room, usually warm and stuffy, felt ice cold. He tossed and turned on his thin mattress, his eyes darting nervously around the dark corners of the room. Suddenly, he heard a faint whisper. "Leon." He sat up, sweat dripping from his head. "Who is there?" he said, his voice trembling. The whisper came again, this time even louder. "You are mine," the voice said. Leon sat there, terrified. He turned on the light but saw no one. Was I dreaming? He asked himself as he felt a hot slap across his face. Leon immediately lost his ability to speak. He did everything possible to speak, but his mouth seemed numb and unable to say a word. He approached his grandmother's room, his trembling hands clutching the doorframe as saliva dripped uncontrollably from his mouth. His grandmother sat up in alarm when she saw him standing there, his wide eyes filled with terror and his lips quivering as if trying to form words. "Leon, what's wrong?" "Talk to me," she cried, rushing to him. But Leon could only make incoherent sounds, his mouth refusing to obey him. His grandmother grabbed his face, her eyes scanning with concern. "Did someone hurt you, Leon? Speak to me." Leon shook his head violently, tears streaming down his face. His grandmother's panic grew. She led him to sit on the edge of her bed, praying softly underneath her breath. "God of mercy, whatever is wrong with my grandson, please have mercy. Please, Lord." That night, Leon sat by his grandmother's side, unable to sleep, unable to speak, and unable to escape the oppressive cold that seemed to cling to his skin. The next morning, word spread around the neighborhood that Leon had lost his ability to speak. His friends from the mortuary incident came to visit him, their faces pale with fear. One of them whispered, "This is not normal. That mortuary attendant warned us. I knew we shouldn't have gone there." But it was only the beginning of Leon's torment. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw the face of the dead woman, her pale skin and hollow eyes staring at him, her lips moving silently. Objects in their small home began to move on their own. Pots fell from the shelves, the door creaked open at night, and shadows danced in corners where they should not have been. His grandmother began to hear whispers in her sleep, faint voices calling Leon's name. As the days passed, Leon's condition worsened. He lost so much weight because of his inability to eat properly. People began to gossip as they wondered what had happened to him. Some believed he had contracted a deadly disease, whilst others believed that he was cursed. They mocked him, and Leon, feeling so dejected, began to live a life of isolation. His grandmother did everything to help him, but nothing that she did worked. All the doctors that examined Leon found nothing wrong with him. As Leon's condition worsened, his grandmother grew desperate. His frail body was barely able to move, and his once proud and loud demeanor was now reduced to hollow stares and incoherent sobs. One evening, a kind elderly neighbor named Auntie Grace paid a visit to Leon's grandmother. The soft glow of an oil lamp cast long shadows on the walls as they sat in the quiet living room. She had heard whispers in the market about Leon's encounter with the dead woman at the mortuary and came to offer advice. "My sister, this is not an ordinary sickness. Take your grandson back to where this problem started. The dead do not forgive easily when disrespected," Auntie Grace said firmly, as Leon's grandmother shook her head in agreement. The cool night air seemed to carry the weight of their worry. They arrived at the mortuary the next morning, the dawn light casting eerie shadows on the building's cracked walls. They met the attendant, whose name was Elder Bayo, the same man who warned Leon about his reckless behavior. He stood at the entrance of the mortuary as though he had been waiting for them to arrive. His sharp eyes scanned Leon's trembling body as he shook his head in disappointment. "I warned you, young man," Elder Bayo said in a low voice, "for you mocked the dead, and now you have awakened something that cannot be easily silenced." His grandmother began to plead with him to help her grandson. Please, Elder, help my grandson. Whatever it takes, we will do it. Please don't let him die like this." Elder Bio sighed deeply, his weathered face etched with a mixture of sadness and resolve, and gestured for them to follow him inside. They were led to a small room lined with old shelves and flickering candles that cast an otherworldly glow.